Welcome, and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. On the program today, we bring a celebration of Christmas in a very unique and heartwarming way. Joining us today on the Beyond 50 radio program today is nationally recognized author of the heartwarming fictional stories trilogies, starting with The Reindeer Keeper, The Snowman Maker, and her newest edition, which is The Candle Giver. I'd like to welcome on the program today our guest, Barbara Briggs Ward. Barbara, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Daniel. I'm so glad to be here with you and tell your listeners about this trilogy of Christmas stories.
Now, first of all, tell us, since you're on the East Coast, are you having any snow this December?
No. As a lover of Christmas and winter and snow, I'm shocked that we have absolutely no snow. In fact, it's been raining for the last week, and there's no snow on the ground, and it's about 50 degrees, and there's nothing in the forecast.
So it sounds like this season you're probably going to be building a dirt man rather than a snowman, right?
Yes, that's so true. But, you know, if you have that spirit in your heart, Christmas comes anyway.
That's a fact. It does keep coming, just like in The Grinch.
Just like in The Grinch.
Now, tell us how this started for you, first of all. It's been a while since I've talked with you. You must have been pretty busy between the last time we talked on the radio and now. What have you been up to?
Well, yes, we spoke when the first book came out. The Reindeer Keeper came out in 2010. And when that was released, I had no plan to continue on with it. I just had this burning story come to me, and I wrote it, and I thought that was that. But the reaction to The Reindeer Keeper was very, very good, and people kept encouraging me to go back to that family and back to that storyline and continue on. Mm-hmm. So after thinking about it, I did that, and I'm very happy I did. I came out in 2012 with The Snowman Maker, and as you mentioned, we just came out with The Candle Giver. So what it is, the Reindeer Keeper was the beginning, and then The Snowman Maker is another family. There's a thin thread that connects them. And in The Candle Giver, the latest book, they go back to the farmhouse that's the focal point in The Reindeer Keeper. The two families go back to the farmhouse in The Candle Giver, the last book, and there's a double wedding on Christmas Eve, and there are magical, wondrous family things that go on that kind of bring it all together. But I tell people, while there's a thread that connects them, and it could be called the trilogy, each book is written strong enough to stand on its own. So if you happen to pick up the second one, The Snowman Maker, it's a lovely Christmas story about Ben and Ellie. So each one is strong enough to be independent, but yet it makes a beautiful flowing story with the three of them. Mm-hmm. So it's been busy.
Well, there's no doubt about that, and of course, as you were saying earlier, that your stories really resonate into the hearts and the souls of people as they read them. I know I was certainly touched when I read them, and the fact is it's really interesting how you come to make these so realistic. What influences do you draw from that allows this to happen for you?
Oh, when I think about it, I think of many things that as a child you don't realize it, but it leaves an impression on you, and if you tend to be a bit creative, you find that still within you, within your heart and your soul. I was really fortunate to have grown up in the country. There were 4 houses in a row, and they were all full of relatives. And the old farmhouse, that's the focal point, along with the barn in the first story, The Reindeer Keeper, in my mind that turned out to be in the story where my grandparents raised 6 daughters, and they farmed the surrounding fields. So our growing up there out in the country really influenced my writing in ways I never understood. My cousins and I were always outside, always playing in the fields and the creek and the pine grove and the old barn and the farmhouse. So I think all of that, all of the nature's beauty and all of the feeling of family with the 4 houses in a row and the smells and the sounds, and we live in a beautiful area in northern New York State, right near the Canadian border, where there's usually 4 seasons, and all those 4 seasons, you anticipate each one coming. So I think that growing up really had a huge influence on me. And another part of that is my father was a funeral director, and so from an early age, I didn't realize it, but I was learning about the thin line between life and death, and how important it is to really appreciate what's around you. And it's not about the money; it's about the people and nature and all that, and coming together. So I learned early on that life is truly a gift, because later on in my life, when I was in my early 20s, my father moved us from the country to above the funeral home in the small city in northern New York where I live. And we lived above the funeral home. So, ironically, we were above the funeral home living, and down below there were families mourning, for their loss. So it was a contradiction, but a huge lesson in life that actually worked its way into the first book, The Reindeer Keeper, because the female heroine, Abby, it actually turned out that her father was a funeral director, and it turned out that she clipped obituaries out of the paper like I used to do for my father, and she loved the obituary. She loved the middle part, and she would always tell her children, we don't really control the beginning or the end in our obituary, but we have lots of control over the middle. So that works into the storyline. They have 2 grown sons, and it works into the storyline as they, with any family, you have happiness and joy and loss and struggle. And Abby's rearing as a funeral director's daughter has a lot to do with how she looks at life and encourages her children. So I was really blessed between growing up in the country, being surrounded by family, and I often tell people that because my father was a funeral director, back then they were on duty 24 hours, 7 days a week, so we really went nowhere. We never did a vacation. But it really didn't matter. I've never even been to Disneyland, but I never thought I lost out, because we had it all. We had the farm, we had the barn, they took an old chicken coop. All the grown-ups took an old chicken coop, and they took the remains of the chicken nest out, and they put everything from an old schoolhouse that had been abandoned for years. They put it all in this chicken coop for us, and that included the desks and the chalkboards and all the books. And my cousins and I played in there all the time. In the wintertime, there wasn't much glass in the windows, and the snow would come in, but it never stopped us. We were always in there playing and pretending we had all the books, and our minds really, really took off in wonder, and it was so much fun. And that's where I got the spark to write. I was about 7 or 8, I tell people, when I would either bring books with me. My grandparents and mother bought us all kinds of books, the Nancy Drew books, the Bobbsey twins, all the Laura Ingalls Wilder books. So if we weren't reading, I would be taking little bits of paper and cutting out little books and pretending I was drawing and writing stories. And back then I even gave myself a pen name. I called myself Maggie O'Shea. I don't know where that came from. But it really all started back there, and I was really blessed. And I think to have a child have a foundation of play like that, Mr. Rogers always says that play is a child's work, and I really believe that, because we were so lucky. We played every day after we did our little chores. But it was a country road out in the country. There's beautiful farmland here, just rolling country roads that go into the horizon, and whatever the season, it's just absolutely beautiful. So I can't say enough for growing up here and being surrounded by family. I was really blessed.
Mm-hmm. And you feel a lot of those elements in the book that I think that resonate with everybody that reads these. They say you can see a piece and experience a piece of yourself in your stories. And I think the key element that you're hitting on here especially is to allow people to understand how grateful they should be for what they have.
Yeah.
We tend to live in a society that always tries to tell us somehow that we're not good enough, we don't have enough, compare with the Joneses. And therefore, a lot of us feel that we've somehow fallen short, when the fact is it wasn't our message in the first place that made us come to believe that. It was our belief in the message, which really had no foundation in the first place. And just like you were saying about, I've never been to Disneyland, for instance, but that's okay, because my experiences never allowed me to feel, for instance, that I've really lost out on anything, so to speak.
Oh, right. Definitely. And on Sunday evenings, with those 4 houses, each family would take would take a turn and host the other families, and everybody would come over, and and the TV was off, and everybody would talk. And then in the summertime, I had an aunt who lived with my grandparents. They had eventually, grown older and didn't farm, so they sold the farmhouse, and actually, more relatives moved into the farmhouse. So a smaller home was built for my grandparents and an aunt, and they had pine trees in the backyard. So most every supper time in the summer, all the families would gather under the pine trees and bring their suppers, and everybody would share. And then afterwards, the little kids might play a baseball game, but people stayed and people talked. There were no devices to take your attention away. Nobody had cell phones. Nobody was texting. It was really just enjoying each other's company. So I really just was blessed, and I think that's where all this sparked from. I know it is.
Well, the other thing to understand, too, is that you're right about Christmas. I mean, when you think about, for instance, when you had written Christmas Magic, which ended up in the Chicken Soup for the Soul series, that you realize that maybe there should be an approach to Christmas that a lot of us have just forgotten.
Yes.
When we were children, to me, the gifts under the tree were fantastic, and we went nuts, and of course that's what we looked forward to as kids to Christmas, but what I remember about Christmas the most, at least as I was growing up, wasn't so much, I can remember some of the things I got over the years, but what I never forget is the darkness in the living room while the tree was lit, and how I could just sit and watch that for hours. The other thing, is I would say to people, my favorite part of Christmas was the stocking. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Maybe because we could get to it and we didn't have to wait for everybody to wake up and be in the living room in anticipation of wrapping gifts. But the fact is over the years, as the idea of Santa Claus wanes, or at least the belief, because all of a sudden now you realize, well, it isn't somebody magical coming in there and doing what we believe they were doing, but then you start to maybe feel, in some cases, a little bit cynical, maybe even bitter, and if something harsh really happens during that particular holiday, you can feel, downright angry about Christmas. Where is this magic everybody else seems to be enjoying that I'm missing out on here? And certainly within your stories, especially as I remember in The Reindeer Keeper, you added that element where they could have felt that way, but it was in their remembrance of their relationship over the years that harsh reality that settled on that couple, didn't really bite them in that direction.
Right. Yeah, so I think that came through my writing because of my growing up in the funeral home. And ironically, I was just thinking today that my father actually passed away on December 22nd in 2008, and we buried him on Christmas Eve, and I've had so many people say to me, oh my God, that's probably ruined every Christmas since. How do you stand it? My so-and-so, they died at Christmas time, and it has put a damper. I can't stand Christmas. And I just turn it around and I tell them, well, you should look at your loved one who's passed away as your Christmas angel, because that's really how I look at my father. He loved Christmas. Every time I hear Silent Night, that was his favorite song. I have his blue Christmas lights that he loved. He really loved Christmas and that whole feeling. So I'm not depressed when I think about that he passed away at Christmas. It really, to me, was his plan. I mean, it was magical to me. It was just absolutely beautiful. I mean, his funeral, not to be morbid, but it was like at the altar, it was poinsettias and trees. I mean, it was just absolutely beautiful. It was just as if he planned it. So, I always try to stress to people that it's all in how you look, like anything in life. It's all in how you look at it, I'm blessed with my own little Christmas angel now, and I know he's up there looking down at me. So,
and it's interesting, too, because I could have also been one of those people who actually felt bitter because of a particular experience I had during in December when my son was 5 years old, as he went into the hospital and then went into a coma. On the 15th of December, he finally returned home 4 months later.
Oh, my goodness.
But it was pretty devastating to be up there in a child ICU and realize this is how some people are spending Christmas.
Yes.
And, the sad part about it, and sometimes it jerks me a little bit to think about it, but, my compassion goes out to a Hispanic family whose 2-year-old daughter was admitted as a result of a gunshot wound to the head from a drive-by shooting. The father was killed.
Mm-hmm.
I arrived Christmas Day evening to come in and visit my son after spending just a few hours with the family. And they were holding the mother up, walking her in the parking lot. You knew the young daughter had passed.
Oh, my goodness.
And you realize, damn, who am I? I can feel the blessing, even though my situation didn't seem any better. Right. But at least it was in a way. And I really wanted to reach out to these people and just give them a hug because I knew what had happened.
Yes.
And, but as you move forward, you realize as harsh as that reality and that experience was, the real blessing was I stopped taking life so damn serious. All the big things that I thought were so big became little things. Right. And so there was a gift, just like you said.
Yeah. And I try to, when I do my stories, when I write about, there's a family in the reindeer keeper and then one in the snowman maker, and I try to go into their family and make it like I'm coming into anyone's home. It's like real. It's not made up fairy tale where everybody's beautiful and life is good and all these beautiful things are under the tree. I mean, there is real hardship. They're like real people. Their core is that they love each other and they're a family, but they do struggle. That's the way I wanted it. I wanted people to recognize these people as it could be them, but all along it's a beautiful family and a beautiful story, but they struggle, and there's joys and happiness and sorrow, and it's real life. And I think like I said, I learned that through my father.
Now, if you can, for our listeners, give us a little bit of a glimpse or an insight of the Candle Giver story itself.
Okay. Well, like I said, I started out with the reindeer keeper, and in there you meet Abby and Steve and their family, and they have been given the gift of the farm house and the barn. So with that, it goes along, and in the snowman maker, there's a relative in the reindeer keeper. It's about Abby and Steve. Abby's cousin is mentioned in the snowman maker, and it's about her family. And Abby's cousin, Abby and Ellie would get together when they were little, and they kept that connection all through as they grew up. And their children, they would always bring their children together. So there's that connection. So when it comes to the Candle Giver, it goes back to the farmhouse, and it brings these two families together at the farmhouse at Christmas. And there's a double wedding on Christmas Eve that concerns those two families. I really don't want to give out too much, but
No, we want people to experience these books.
Yes. But it's a family growing, and changing. Kids grow up and kids change, but it's them coming back together at the farmhouse and at the barn. And the barn is full of reindeer. And in the barn, there's an older man named Thomas, who's a little short guy, who, in the will that when the farm was left to Abby and Steve, there's a provision that the reindeer keeper, he's called the reindeer keeper, Thomas, provision that he's being taken care of, and there's money set aside to take care of the reindeer in a certain way. So he and Abby become very close. So it's this relationship between Abby and Thomas and Abby and Steve, and it's carried through so that when you get back to the latest book, The Candle Giver, Thomas comes back in as the reindeer keeper, and it's all the family coming together back at that farmhouse. And real life.
Mm-hmm. Now, as you wrote these stories, what was that experience like for you? I like to liken it when you're doing your soul's work. You feel something work through you, and I've even described this as I'm on the air, when that moment happens, much like a moment like between you and I today, is all of a sudden you feel something has come in and possessed you and starts working through you. You know you're going through the motions, but you feel personally sort of lost in the process.
Yes.
Then you come out, you just go, I know something just happened there. And it's a wonderful experience. But what is it like for someone like you who writes?
Well, I started out writing for children. I always wanted to write since I grew up in that little chicken coop all the time. But then life happened, I married and had children, but this thing kept burning inside me. But I just would always tell myself, oh, my God, I can't do it now. I don't have time. So anyway, I started out with writing for children, and I had a story published in Highlights for Children. I kept going with that. I had a little character called Snarly Sally, and I did books for her. But if I had really thought in my soul what I was doing, way down deep, and we all have that place, I really wanted to write for adults. But I was my worst enemy. I would tell myself, oh, my God, I can't take a story and characters and have a real beginning and catch people's attention and a middle and end. I don't think I can do that. It was the hardest part to look at that blank screen and think that I could connect words and experiences and all the characters. So I just put it on the back burner until I think it was like 2009 in January. It was after Christmas. Like I said when we started, that I love Christmas, I love winter, I love snow. The more snow, the better. I was standing in the window after Christmas in January, my favorite month, and I felt this horrible feeling that Christmas was so busy doing I don't know what we all do at Christmas, rush around, presents and all that I really never really sat down and, like you say, sat and watched the tree, sat and took a moment or took a peaceful walk. I never enjoyed the whole process. It was all rush, 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 and I'm standing there in the window thinking, I cannot be the only person who's... All of a sudden, in the image of my grandfather's barn came to me, barn that we played in as children. We put shows on. My cousins and I were in there in the haymows all the time. The image came to me from somewhere, and I swear, Daniel, the 3 words, the Ranger Keeper, came. There is a story in that barn. So I mulled it over in my head a few days, and I'm thinking, once I sat down, that Ranger Keeper story just flew out of me. Abby and Steve, I tell people, the main characters in that book, they took it over, and when I would get up from writing for a while, I would go back and read what I wrote, and I couldn't believe I wrote it, They were directing me. There were certain parts when I would write it, I would get up and cry because it's real life. And then I would go back and they would draw me back in, and I really got to think that they were part of my family. It might sound strange, but Abby and Steve became very dear to me, and they still are. And now that the book came out in 2010, so many people come and say to me or write me or email me about Abby and Steve. So what I felt, I'm very proud that they have connected with other people, and so that experience is beyond anything I ever felt before. It's a wondrous place to tap. I truly believe that we all are given gifts. Some do some things exceptionally, and I really do believe that God really gave us all something inside us. Life gets too hard at times. I really think God gave us gifts that if we just really pray and think, we can all tap back into that wonder, into life and experience as God meant us to be. So I was really blessed with being able to sit down and pull that story out from, I don't know where it came from, but it was
and at least you had the instinct as well as the intelligence to act on it.
Well, it was like such an urge that I just couldn't. It was an amazing. It was a force. And once I sat there and once I started, I had some writers. I've spoken to a lot of other writers, and they have a plan. They know what's going to happen. I can honestly say I didn't. I had no clue what was going to happen. I knew it was something that was going to happen in that barn, and it did. So.
And I really like how you were saying that your characters came to true life and sort of you were really journaling what they were doing rather than causing the action of their doing. And it reminds me a lot of Stephen King, even though that's a different genre of writing. But he says the very same thing. He says sometimes it gets very eerie that a character will just go and wander in a direction. Pretty soon you find yourself just journaling what they're doing.
Yes.
And you're thinking to yourself, how is that possible?
No.
But you're allowing the story to unfold itself, and that's, for people who are out there aspiring to write,
yes.
That's what you do. You just allow things to unfold, and pretty soon you're journaling. He says it even got to a point I couldn't get the stories out of me fast enough.
No, that's so true. I had times when, I would write so fast because these characters were acting so fast that I just couldn't keep up to them. So it was wild. It was an amazing experience, and they took the story over, and there were parts after I wrote it, I went, oh, I don't know about that. It wasn't really my story. It was their story. I told Abby and Steve's story. That's what I did.
Now, what I'd like to do is I'd like to quote you on something here, because it was something you said about you remembering your grandfather's barn and the simplicity of things. So here's a quote. See if you remember where this comes from. Simple things sometimes come with memories of a time, a person, a moment, even simple things like jam tarts.
Yeah. I blog a lot about growing up and jam tarts. Now, that's another thing. Jam tarts were such a part of my growing up, and all of a sudden they came out in the Snowman Maker. And it's hard to believe, but jam tarts played a huge role in the Snowman Maker, and it followed over into the Candle Giver. I can still see my grandmother kneading the dough of the leftover pie crust, and she would fill it up with her homemade strawberry preserves and bake it, and we couldn't wait. And so I think just the image of my grandmother working in their kitchen in the farmhouse, the smell of those jam tarts, especially at Christmas time when you have real pine trees and cedar in the home and cinnamon and candles burning, those jam tarts were very powerful to me. And they really played an important role in the Snowman Maker, in the Candle Giver. The simple things. Isn't it funny how the simple things really act to mean so much?
So true. And the reason I wanted to bring that into the fold is because, as we were talking earlier, yes, we may have devastating experiences around a holiday that we believe should always be good and fun and full of surprises, but as we've talked about, that doesn't happen for all of us.
Right.
However, when you bring in that memory of the jam tart or me sitting in front of the tree in the dark while everybody else was asleep, you realize you really are empowered with the choice to decide how your experience is going to be. We have that much power within ourselves.
Yeah.
And if you find yourself having a difficult time during the holiday season, folks, pick up the reindeer, pick up the Snowman Maker, pick up the Candle Giver, and I'm telling you, you'll realize that all those little things will start coming back into you, and things can be pretty good.
Yes, so we all have those little things, all those little tiny memories that are tucked away somewhere that are really, they're little precious gifts inside us that we do have. Lucky.
And there was a time.
It's not the rich diamonds or the cars. It has nothing to do with that. That's material. What's in your heart is what matters.
Mm-hmm. And it was as I was talking with an author, a personal improvement author, and I said, what's really interesting is that we remember the bad times, but we really don't feel the full emotional expression of that bad time when we remember it.
Right.
And I said, but it's interesting how when you remember the good times, you feel the full emotional range of that good time as though you're having it right now. And I wondered, how is that possible that we can remember the bad times but not feel them the way we did?
Right.
But the good times we do.
Oh, yes, we do. Like the jam tarts, I could smell them right now. Grandmother's hands. I always say she had the most beautiful hands. They're always working, creating, mending, doing all that. Yes, the good times. Well, I think, even in the world today, I think good does prevail.
Sure.
Good, the constant struggle between good and evil, good does prevail, as in people.
And the evil is just a way to strengthen up all that stuff about ourselves that we thought was true. I think sometimes.
Yeah, very true.
Now, Barbara, is there a website where people can find out more about you? I know that you've got a wonderful blog that you've got there on your website. You can read those, and where they can also find your book as well.
Yep, my website is barbarabriggsward.com, and if you get on there and you the button author, the blog will fall down, and you'll be able to connect with my blog. Mm-hmm. I am on Facebook. If you plug in the Reindeer Keeper, I also write a lot about growing up and the books and how that's all intertwined. And the books are available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kindle and Nook, Kobo, Apple iPod, Google Play. So they are all out there and readily available at any time.
Well, Barbara, it's been a pleasure to have you back on the program again after several years.
Yep.
And do you have anything coming up here in the near future we should keep our eyes peeled for?
I have an outline in my head, not an outline, but a spark of something that's coming up. So after, like I said, January is my favorite year, and that's where I find a lot of peace and a lot of quiet so that I can really think. I've been extremely busy with these 3 books, which is wonderful. Get to talk to awesome people like you, Daniel. But yes, there's another book mulling around in my head. So if you check back with me, I will let you know what it is.
Well, very good. Again, that's barbarabriggsward.com.
Yes.
Very good. Barbara, I want to wish you and your family a wonderful holiday season, as you certainly shared the magic with all of us to remember how special the little memories are to each and every one of us, and it is a choice. Thank you for joining us here on the program today.
My pleasure. Merry Christmas, everybody.
We want to thank you, the listeners out there, for joining us. You can also discover more. You can visit us at beyond50radio.com, the number 50. We encourage you to sign up for our free weekly e-newsletter as well. You can also visit us on Facebook as well as Twitter at Beyond50Radio. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for tuning in. This is the Beyond 50 radio program, and remember, live your day past halfway.